Jim Spence was born in the early 1960s in the Woodvale area of Belfast, Northern Ireland, during a time of significant social and political turmoil. The city was a flashpoint for the conflict known as the Troubles, which pitted Irish Republican nationalists against Loyalist Unionists. Spence grew up in a Protestant working-class community on the Shankill Road, a region strongly Loyalist in sentiment. This area, with its divisive and often violent politics, would shape his future involvement in paramilitarism. Growing up in such a politically charged environment, Spence was surrounded by both the culture of Protestant unionism and the spectre of violence that accompanied it. It was an environment where loyalty to the British Crown and the Unionist cause was a major influence on local life. His early years would be marked by a familiar story for many young men of his generation. An upbringing full of economic hardship, family connections to the community, and the ever-present spectre of the civil unrest that defined Northern Ireland in the 1960s and 1970s. As Spence entered his teenage years, the Troubles escalated, with regular clashes between the police and members of the Irish National Liberation Army, the Provisional IRA, and Loyalist paramilitary groups. For young men like Spence, the conflict wasn't just something happening on the news, it was a direct part of everyday life. Amidst this turmoil, Spence became more involved in the politics of the Protestant Unionist community. By the early 1980s, Spence's life had taken a turn toward involvement in the Loyalist paramilitary movement. The Ulster Defence Association, UDA, had become the largest Loyalist group in Northern Ireland. It was formed to combat what members saw as a rising threat from Irish Republicans who sought to unite Northern Ireland with the Republic of Ireland. As Spence came of age, the UDA offered an avenue for him to fight back and assert his identity as a Loyalist, all while claiming to protect the interests of the Protestant working class. Spence joined the UDA at a time when the group was highly active in both paramilitary activity and criminal enterprises. The UDA was known for its violent campaigns against the Catholic nationalist community, including assassinations, bombings, and intimidation. It wasn't long before Spence gained recognition for his efforts and commitment to the cause. By the late 1980s, he had risen to a leadership position within the West Belfast Brigade, the UDA's most influential and powerful unit. He quickly garnered a reputation for his fierce loyalty to the UDA and his ability to coordinate military-style operations against suspected Republicans, particularly targeting members of the IRA and other nationalist groups. His rapid ascent in the ranks of the UDA solidified his place as one of the leading figures in Loyalist paramilitarism during this period. By the early 1990s, Spence had become the leader of B Company within the UDA's West Belfast Brigade. His company, responsible for organizing and executing attacks against Republican targets, quickly became notorious for its effectiveness and ruthless tactics. The area of West Belfast was home to both Loyalist and nationalist communities, which meant that control of the streets was crucial. Spence played a key role in ensuring that his brigade maintained dominance over the local Protestant areas, exerting a brutal form of social control over both his enemies and the local community. Spence's leadership was characterized by strategic cunning, an aggressive stance against Republican forces, and a willingness to use violence to achieve his objectives. His reputation as a no-nonsense leader spread throughout the Loyalist community. However, Spence was also known for his close relationships with certain British intelligence officials, notably Brian Nelson, a key figure in the collusion between Loyalist paramilitaries and the British state. This connection between Spence's UDA unit and British intelligence would later play a critical role in the unfolding of his legacy. In the 1980s and 1990s, the UDA's West Belfast Brigade, under Spence's command, became embroiled in a network of collusion with British intelligence services. This collaboration allowed Spence and his men to target Republicans more effectively sometimes with inside information provided by British intelligence officers. The infamous British agent Brian Nelson, who worked as an informant for the British Army, played a key role in this operation, supplying intelligence that was used by the UDA to carry out targeted assassinations of known or suspected Republicans. While Spence publicly presented himself as a defender of Loyalist interests, it was widely known that the UDA's activities, including killings and bombings, were not always in line with its supposed mission of protecting the Unionist community. The UDA's increasing reliance on intelligence gathering, collusion with the state, and its violent tactics raised serious ethical and political questions, not just within Northern Ireland, but also internationally. Spence's own role in this complex network of informants, covert operations, and paramilitary activity remains controversial. While he continued to justify his actions as part of a larger struggle against republicanism, the use of state-sponsored intelligence to carry out attacks on civilians, including members of the Catholic community, left a lasting stain on his reputation. The 1990s were a time of both internal and external conflict for the UDA. While the organization continued its military campaigns against Republicans, it was also battling internal strife, with factions emerging within the group. One of the most significant rivalries was between Spence and Johnny Adair, a more extreme and unpredictable figure within the UDA. Spence's relationship with Adair and other key figures within the UDA deteriorated over time. In 1992, Spence's influence was undermined when he was arrested as part of a series of crackdowns on UDA leaders under the Stevens Inquiry. This inquiry, launched by the British government, aimed to expose the UDA's links to the security forces and uncover the full extent of the collusion between Loyalist paramilitaries and British intelligence. Although Spence was later released, his standing within the organization was severely damaged, particularly by the rising prominence of Johnny Adair, who assumed greater control of the UDA's operations in West Belfast. Adair's increasing power was a direct challenge to Spence's leadership, leading to heightened tensions within the organization. In 2000, Spence was eventually sidelined and expelled from the UDA after accusations of betrayal and of colluding with rival factions within the group. This was seen as a major blow to his career and influence, marking a turning point in his life. After his expulsion from the UDA, Spence faced the wrath of former allies and rivals alike. While he was no longer an official member of the UDA, Spence continued to exert influence over certain sections of the Loyalist community, and his name remained synonymous with the turbulent history of the UDA's West Belfast Brigade. However, as the troubles wound down and the peace process took hold, the role of paramilitary groups like the UDA began to diminish. During this time, Spence attempted to move away from the paramilitary lifestyle, but his reputation continued to haunt him. He became embroiled in several post-conflict Loyalist feuds, notably the North Belfast feud, which saw a bloody conflict between the UDA and the Ulster Volunteer Force, UVF. This violence reflected the ongoing power struggles within Loyalist factions, even as the formal peace process aimed to create a lasting resolution for Northern Ireland. After the end of the Troubles and the signing of the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, Jim Spence's role in Northern Irish politics and paramilitary activity diminished. However, his legacy remains controversial, and his name continues to be associated with the darker side of Loyalist paramilitarism. Despite his expulsion from the UDA, Spence's involvement in the Troubles continues to be scrutinized, with many questioning his role in the atrocities committed by the UDA and its connections to British intelligence. In recent years, Spence has largely avoided the public eye, though he remains a figure of interest in Northern Ireland's complex political history. He has occasionally spoken about his past, defending his actions as part of a larger struggle for the protection of Loyalist values. Though his comments have often been met with criticism from both Republican and nationalist communities, who see his actions as emblematic of the brutality and corruption that marred the Troubles. Jim Spence's story is one of power, violence, and loyalty to a cause that, for many, is now a painful chapter in the history of Northern Ireland. His rise through the ranks of the UDA, his leadership in the West Belfast Brigade, and his association with figures like Brian Nelson and Johnny Adair all serve as reminders of the violent legacy of the Troubles. While Spence's contributions to Loyalist politics and paramilitarism cannot be overlooked, his life story is ultimately a testament to the destructive power of division, violence, and sectarianism. As Northern Ireland continues to heal from the scars of the past, Jim Spence's legacy serves as both a warning and a reflection on the darker chapters of the conflict. Jim Spence's life was shaped by the tensions and violence of the Troubles. His rise through the ranks of the UDA and his controversial leadership reflect the deeply divided nature of Northern Irish society at the time. His role in the conflict, marked by collusion, power struggles, and paramilitary activity, continues to be a subject of debate and reflection. As history moves forward, Spence's story serves as a crucial chapter in understanding the lasting impact of the Troubles on Northern Ireland's political landscape. That is it for our video today. Like and subscribe and comment below what you think of Jim Spence, and I will see you on the next video.